Worried you'll buy the wrong TV in 2025 and waste your money? In this video, we'll go through the 15 worst TVs to buy according to Consumer Reports, so you know exactly which models to avoid before you hit checkout. Kicking off the list at number 15, LG UT70 series. The looks 4K feels last-gen TV. This is that TV that's always on promo, stacked under a giant 4K HDR Smart TV sign, making you think you just found the steal of the year. But once you actually live with it, you realize most of that hype is coming from the box, not the screen. The UT70 line is technically 4K, technically HDR, technically smart, but in real-world use, everything feels like it's running at 70%. The panel is dim, the contrast is weak, and with no local dimming, dark scenes never really go dark. You get that gray, cloudy look whenever you watch anything at night, and HDR movies that should pop just end up looking flat and washed out. Motion isn't amazing either. Sports and fast gaming can feel a little smeary, and you're capped at 60 Hz with no fancy gaming features to save it. The smart system itself isn't the issue. WebOS is fine, but on this hardware, it can feel sluggish. Like you're always one button press ahead of the TV. It's okay for a casual bedroom screen, but if this is your main TV, you're going to notice the corners that got cut every single day. If you're seeing this model next to slightly pricier mini LED or QLED options, that's the trap. The price looks friendly, but for movies, sports, or gaming in 2025, this is the kind of bargain that ends up on your regret list fast. At number 14, LG QNED 70A, the fake fancy upgrade that isn't. This one is dangerous because it looks like a big upgrade on paper. You see QNED, you see 4K, you see HDR, and your brain goes, oh cool, this must be close to OLED. But once this TV is actually in your living room, reality hits fast. This model is basically a budget LCD dressed up in premium branding. It doesn't get the proper mini LED local dimming you expect from QNED marketing, so black levels stay closer to dark gray, and those cinematic night scenes you imagine just don't land. HDR technically works, but there isn't enough contrast or brightness behind it, so highlights don't pop, and everything kind of blends together. Motion is locked at 60 Hz with no real gaming extras, so if you hook up a PlayStation or Xbox and try to play fast shooters or sports games, you'll notice blur and a lack of smoothness. For casual TV, it's fine, but if you're a gamer or movie person, it feels instantly mid. The worst part is where this TV usually sits on the shelf. It's often priced just below genuinely better QLED or mini LED models, so it tricks you into thinking you're grabbing a near flagship deal. In reality, you're paying extra mainly for the QNED logo, not actual performance. If you want a real upgrade, skip this TV and either save up for a proper mini LED or drop down to a simpler model that doesn't pretend to be something it's not. At number 13, LG UR9000. The looks fine in store, regret at home TV. This is that TV you see in the showroom playing a bright demo reel of beaches, city lights, and cartoon movies. In that environment, the UR9000 looks fine. The colors seem okay, the price feels reasonable, and you tell yourself, yeah, that'll do. Then you bring it home, turn off the lights, put on a movie, and suddenly you see what you actually bought. This TV struggles the second you give it anything challenging. Dark scenes turn into a gray fog because the contrast is weak, and the panel can't produce deep blacks. There's no real local dimming to carve out detail, so shadows just mush together. HDR content technically plays, but without serious brightness or contrast behind it, highlights that should be dramatic just look dull. It's 4K on paper, but the experience still feels weirdly flat. For sports and gaming, the problems keep going. The refresh rate is locked at 60 Hz, with no premium gaming features to smooth things out. Fast camera pans, football matches, racing games, all of it can show blur and judder that make the screen feel cheap next to similarly priced competitors. The UR9000 really exposes itself over time. The more you watch, the more you notice the corners it cuts. Average sound, mid-level brightness, meh motion, washed out blacks. It's the classic good enough TV that slowly turns into the one you regret not upgrading from. And if you think that's underwhelming, the next LG model somehow manages to strip things back even further. Sitting at number 12, LG UT75, the 4K on paper, may in reality TV. This is the kind of TV you grab during a weekend sale because the tag says 4K HDR and smart for way less than the big boys. The model name sounds modern, the specs look decent, and you convince yourself, I'm not picky, this will be fine. Then you get it home, turn off the lights, and realize why it was so cheap. The panel on this TV is as basic as it gets. Direct lit, no real local dimming, soft contrast. Dark scenes never really feel dark. Blacks show up as cloudy gray, details and shadowy corners disappear, and anything atmospheric or cinematic just looks flat. HDR support is technically there, but without serious brightness or contrast, it's like putting premium fuel into an old scooter. The logo flashes, but the experience doesn't change. Motion isn't a strength either. With a 60 Hz refresh rate and no advanced gaming features, fast content feels a little blurred and choppy. Sports, racing games, action movies, they all expose how average this model really is. Sound is also bare minimum. Thin, boxy audio that almost forces you to buy a soundbar just to make dialogue and explosions feel alive. Where this TV ends up working is in places where you don't care. A spare bedroom, a rental, a screen for casual news, and YouTube. But for your main living room setup in 2025, this is the definition of settling. And if you think that's disappointing, wait until we hit the Samsung that proves even a big-name logo can't save a weak budget line. Number 11 goes to Samsung Crystal UHDDU7200, the Samsung logo Budget Energy TV. This is the one you see in big stores with that trusted Samsung logo and a price that makes you think, wow, that's a steal. You get 4K, smart features, a clean design, and then you take it home, turn off the lights, and realize why it was cheaper than the others on the shelf. This TV is built around a very basic panel. In bright store lighting, the demo footage looks fine. But in a real living room, especially at night, the weak contrast really shows. Blacks look more like dark gray, shadow details get muddy, and movies that should feel cinematic end up looking flat. HDR support is there on paper, but without the brightness and deep blacks to back it up, those HDR highlights barely feel different from regular content. For gaming and sports, it's the same story. You're stuck at 60 Hz with no real high-end gaming features. Fast camera pans, racing games, football matches, they all reveal blur and judder that you don't expect from something with a Samsung badge. The sound is also very average, thin, a bit hollow, and not nearly strong enough for big living rooms. This model isn't totally useless. It can work as a casual TV in a bright kitchen or a spare room. But if you're buying your main 2025 screen, you do not want your movie night TV to feel like the cheapest thing Samsung could get out the door. At number 10, Hisense 50U6HF, the spec sheet catfish TV. This one is sneaky. On paper, this model looks like a total win. 4K resolution, QLED panel, Fire TV built in, all the big HDR badges slapped across the box. You scroll past it online or see it on the shelf and think, wait, why is this so cheap for all that? Then you actually sit with it for a few nights and the illusion starts to crack. This TV is the definition of specs greater than experience. The color looks decent at first, but the overall picture just doesn't have that punch you expect from a QLED. Dark scenes lose detail, blacks lift into gray, and HDR moments that should explode off the screen feel more like a gentle nudge. Because this model is locked at 60 Hz with pretty basic motion handling, anything fast exposes its limits. Sports, anime fight scenes, racing games, They all reveal blur and little hiccups that make the whole thing feel more budget than the marketing suggests. And while Fire TV is convenient, it can feel a bit sluggish on this hardware, especially once you load it up with apps. This TV isn't completely trash. It can work in a smaller room for casual watching. But if you're buying based on that shiny feature list, you'll quickly realize it doesn't live up to the promise. If you really want a Hisense, there are other models that actually match their hype. This one is the classic example of why you don't trust the box more than the panel. At number 9, Hisense 40A4K, the still stuck in 2012 TV. This is the TV that feels like it time traveled onto a 2025 shelf by mistake. You see the Hisense logo, you see Smart TV, you see the low price and think, perfect for the bedroom. Then you bring it home and realize you basically bought a slightly upgraded hotel TV. First red flag, this model isn't even 4K. It's 1080p in a world where budget sets are doing full 4K with HDR as standard. That might sound fine for a smaller screen, but when you're streaming modern content or using newer consoles, 4K the difference shows. Everything looks softer, less detailed, and just a bit behind the times. There's no real HDR support, no advanced picture tech, and the panel itself is basic LED with pretty weak brightness. In a bright room, it washes out. In a dark room, the blacks look patchy and gray. Viewing angles are narrow too, so move a little off-center and the image fades fast. The ports are dated, the processing isn't built for fast action, and gaming on this thing feels like a compromise from the moment you plug in a console. It's the kind of TV that technically works, but never really feels good. Could it live in a guest room, Airbnb, or kitchen wall where people just throw on news or YouTube? Sure, but as soon as you try to use it like a proper modern screen, it shows its age instantly. And if you think that's rough, the next Hisense proves that even full 4K can still feel undercooked when the panel can't keep up. Holding the number 8 spot, Hisense 55A7N, the almost good but not quite TV. This is that TV you buy when you're trying to be smart with money. You see a big 55-inch screen, 4K resolution, Google TV built in, and a price that undercuts the big brands. On the surface, it looks like the perfect sweet spot between cheap and premium. But once you start living with it, you realize it never quite crosses the line into actually good. The panel is where this model starts to stumble. Colors can look decent in bright scenes, but contrast isn't strong, so darker moments feel flat and lifeless. Blacks lean into dark gray, which means anything with moody lighting, sci-fi, thrillers, horror movies loses that dramatic depth you were hoping for. HDR is technically supported, but it doesn't get bright enough or deep enough in the shadows to really sell the effect. And then there's motion. With a 60 Hz refresh rate and average motion handling, fast content exposes the weaknesses quickly. Football, F1, basketball, anime, fast shooters, you'll spot blur and stutter that remind you this is still very much a budget panel. Google TV is a nice bonus, but even that can feel a little sluggish when you hop between heavy apps. This TV isn't completely terrible. It's fine for casual Netflix, background shows, or a secondary room. But as your main screen, it's one of those almost products. Almost bright enough, almost sharp enough, almost smooth enough. And in 2025, almost just isn't worth your upgrade money. If you're liking this breakdown so far, hit like and subscribe so you and more people don't accidentally waste money on a trash TV. Up next, sliding into number 7, Hisense 65Q D7N, the all-talk, no follow-through TV. This one is the classic overpromiser. The model name sounds futuristic. The box is covered in buzzwords like QLED, 4K, high refresh rate, gaming features. And for a second, you really feel like you found a hidden gem. But once this TV leaves the store lighting and lands in your living room, the gap between marketing and reality becomes pretty obvious. The big problem is consistency. This TV can look okay in bright, colorful content, But the minute you give it a dark movie or a moody series, everything falls apart. Blacks aren't truly black, just deep gray, so shadows look mushy and you lose detail in the areas that should feel cinematic. HDR highlights exist, but they never quite punch through, so instead of that wow moment when lightning flashes or neon signs glow, you get a muted shrug. Then there's the whole high refresh rate situation. Yes, this model can technically hit higher numbers, but the processing and panel quality don't always back that up. Fast-paced games and sports still show blur, stutter, and inconsistency that remind you this is not a top-tier gaming screen, just a budget TV with gamer-friendly wording on the box. For casual everyday use, this TV isn't a total disaster, but if you're buying it thinking you've found a cheap beast for movies and gaming, you're going to notice those corners that got cut. It's a reminder that specs alone don't guarantee a great screen, and the next model proves that in an even bigger size. Taking the number 6 spot, Hisense 75QD65NF, the big screen, small payoff TV. This is the TV that hooks you with size first. 75 inches, 4K QLED, Fire TV built in, and a price that makes your brain go, wait, I can get a whole wall of screen for that? It looks like the ultimate living room flex, until you actually sit down to watch something serious on it. The main issue with this model is that the performance doesn't scale with the size. On a panel this huge, every weakness gets magnified. The contrast is mid, so instead of rich blacks and crisp detail, dark scenes turn into a soft gray blanket. You lose the fine details in shadows, which kills the atmosphere in thrillers, sci-fi, or any movie that isn't lit like a sitcom. HDR technically works, but the highlights don't have that punch you expect from a giant cinema-style screen. Then there's motion. With budget-level processing trying to push all those pixels, fast scenes expose the limits fast. Sports, action movies, and gaming can show blur and stutter that feel way more obvious on a 75-inch canvas. And because the speakers also have to fill that much space, the audio ends up sounding thin and underpowered unless you add a soundbar. This TV is fine if your only goal is massive screen for cheap and you're not picky. But if you want that big screen experience, deep blacks, strong HDR, smooth motion, this is not the giant you're looking for. At number 5, Toshiba 75C350KU, the big but kinda blurry TV. This is the classic wow 75 inches for that price? Trap. You see the brand, the giant screen, Fire TV built in, and it feels like you just hacked the system. But once this TV is on your wall, reality kicks in. The picture is soft, the brightness is mid, and contrast is weak, so dark scenes look washed out instead of dramatic. HDR is technically there, but it never really pops. Highlights feel dull, shadows lose detail, and everything just looks flatter than it should on a screen that huge. Because this TV is so big, every weakness is magnified. Any blur, any patchy blacks, any weak color instantly stands out. The built-in smart features are convenient, but they can't hide that the panel itself is strictly budget. At number 4, Vizio 5555J01, the clearance aisle special TV. This is the TV you see on a random end cap with a giant red discount sticker and think, hey, that's not bad for a 55-inch 4K. But this model is exactly why some deals should stay in the clearance aisle. On paper, it's a 4K HDR smart TV. In real life, it's dim, low on contrast, and totally underwhelming with modern HDR content. Dark scenes turn muddy, bright highlights never really shine, and colors look more tired than vibrant. It's the kind of screen where you keep fiddling with picture settings, hoping there's a secret, make this not look cheap mode. There isn't. The sound doesn't help either. It's thin and hollow enough that a basic soundbar feels mandatory, not optional. If you spot this TV for a suspiciously good price in 2025, just remember, it's there because better screens already passed it by. Cracking the top 3, we've got Vizio M65Q6M-K04. the premium name budget performance trap. This is the TV that tricks a lot of people. You see M series, you see QLED, you see Dolby Vision, HDR10+, and the price looks way lower than the big brands offering the same buzzwords. On paper, it feels like you just found a secret mid-range killer. In reality, this model is more like a V series in a nicer jacket. The big problem is contrast and brightness. This TV really struggles to deliver that deep, inky black level you want for movies. Instead, dark scenes come out murky and flat, with details smudged into the background. HDR technically works, but the panel never gets bright enough to give you that real cinema punch, so highlights feel weak and washed out. Then, there's consistency. Depending on the scene, you'll notice blooming, elevated blacks, and a general sense that the TV is fighting its own limitations. It's the kind of screen where you constantly think, this should look better than it does. For casual streaming in a bright room, it's passable. But if you're buying it hoping for a true mid-range experience with rich HDR and movie night depth, you're going to feel shortchanged. If you want a Vizio, you're honestly safer either going with a cheaper model and accepting its basic, or stepping up to something genuinely better. This one sits in the middle and doesn't fully deliver on either side. Runner-up at number 2, LG UA77 series, the LG but make it off-brand TV. This is the lineup that proves not every TV with an LG logo is automatically a safe choice. You'll see this model in big box stores with a nice clean design, 4K HDR, LG's smart platform, and a very friendly price. On the surface, it looks like classic solid mid-range LG for less. But once you actually start watching, it feels more like a knockoff version of what you expect from the brand. The core problem is the panel. This TV uses basic backlighting with no real local dimming, so contrast is weak from the jump. Blacks never get truly black. They hover in that murky gray zone that kills the mood in dark movies and TV shows. Night scenes lose depth, shadows blur together, and anything meant to feel dramatic just doesn't. HDR is technically supported, but without strong brightness or real black levels, you get all of the logo and none of the impact. Motion and gaming don't rescue it either. You're stuck at 60 Hz with no serious gaming perks, so fast sports and action-heavy games show blur and stutter that make the TV feel a step behind competitors in the same price band. Sound is bare minimum too, thin, small, and instantly begging for a soundbar. This is the kind of TV that exists to hit a price point, not a performance standard. If you're set on LG, you're way better off skipping this series and stepping up one tier to something that actually feels like an upgrade, not a compromise. And taking the number 1 spot, Westinghouse WD-24HX1201. The why does this still exist? TV. This is less a TV and more a time capsule. You see the tiny 24-inch screen, the ultra-low price, and think, perfect for the kitchen, or grandma just needs something simple. But the second you turn this thing on, you realize simple is not the same as painful. We're talking 720p resolution in 2025. No smart features, weak brightness, paper-thin sound. The picture looks soft, colors are dull, and any darker scene turns into a murky mess. Move even a little off-center, and the image washes out like a cheap laptop from 2010. This TV doesn't just feel behind the curve, it feels like it fell off the curve and never got back up. Could it technically show the news or a random game show? Sure, but even budget streaming sticks are too good for this screen. When you can buy better 1080p or 4K small TVs with apps built in for not much more, this model stops being a deal and becomes a warning sign. If you see this TV in 2025, treat it like expired milk in the electronics aisle. Walk past it and don't look back. And that's the list. 15 TVs you'll want to avoid in 2025 if you don't like wasting money. Do you have any models in mind that you're considering? Let me know in the comments and I'll give you some buyer advice. And watch the next video on screen to see the 8 best TV to buy in 2025.